ハイパースピードメディア。
Hey guys, welcome back to the channel. Previously on our last episode, we created some mounts for the intercooler and also mount for the radiator. We mounted to the truck, and now on this episode we're going to focus on the clutch and the transmission. So you can see here, I got the Miata MX-5 transmission as well as the B2200 transmission. They're both very similar transmissions, just a few differences. And over here, I got three Miata clutches. One is stock, one is the ACT clutch, stage 2, and also a stage 2 flying Miata clutch. So we're gonna take a deeper dive and get a closer look into it. All right, let's take a closer look at the clutches. So this is the stock OEM type clutch. This is the ACT or ACT stage 2 clutch. And this is the stage 2 flying Miata clutch. So the first thing we're going to do is remove the pressure plate. And now we expose the clutch. As you can see, this is the clutch. And inside the clutch is slightly different. It's a different style. This one is spring loaded. This one used some kind of isolator or rubber bushing. And this one also uses spring. So the spring and I guess this isolator rubber bushing are pretty smooth engagement, similar to factory. They have other types of design where it's more aggressive, but for this is for street driving, these are perfect for that. All right, coming to the flywheel, we can see this is the OEM one. This is the flying Miata flywheel, and this is the ACT or ACT flywheel. You can see the difference. This is very solid. This is like lightweight aluminum type flywheel. And this is very lightweight also because they cut holes in each part of the flywheel edge to get more weight reduction. The good thing about this flywheel is that you could pretty much, you don't have to resurface this. You could just buy a whole brand new plate and just insert a new plate in there. I'm going to reuse, probably reuse this one because I'll save this for another build. Reuse this one, but change the bearing on this one. All right, the first thing I'm going to do is punch out the bearing right here. The easiest way to punch it out is to use the socket that fits the outer lip of the bearing. So the socket I'm going to use is 24 millimeter, and it fits just perfectly on the outer lip of the bearing. If you use a socket that's smaller, you're going to damage the bearing. So make sure you use the correct socket. All right, so I'm going to insert that socket in there and tap it lightly. And it's coming out. Like so. And here's the new bearing, but before I insert the new bearing, I'm going to clean up the flywheel a little bit with a little brake cleaner. Now it's time to insert the new bearing. So I'm going to just kind of lay it in place right here. Now, you don't want to tap the bearing with the hammer. If you don't have a rubber mallet or something like that, what you can do is get the old bearing in place right here, kind of line it up, then tap it lightly in like opposite direction. So it'll be like 12 o'clock, 6 o'clock, 3 o'clock, 9 o'clock. All right guys, so let's take a comparison of the two transmissions. So this side is the Miata transmission from a 5-speed, and this is a B2000 or B2200 5-speed manual transmission. Both of them are about the same height. So they're about the same height, but the shifter location is slightly different. So that's very important, because if you're retrofitting the Miata transmission, you're going to have to cut a hole to fit the shifter. So I'm going to try to avoid doing that, so I'm going to reuse the B2200 transmission for that part. But everything else looks pretty similar. So the height of the bell housing is about the same right here. And so we're going to disconnect that and swap those two. And the mounting location of the transmission mount is different also. So this has a PPF, power plant frame, and this uses a transmission mount with its own bushing. So this bushing is worn out. I'm going to buy new bushing for this. And also the speed sensor looks exactly the same, but the only difference is that one is on this side, the right side, and one's on the left side. So good thing is that I'm reusing the B2000 transmission, so it should mount right onto that. Let's go ahead and disassemble the transmission and then swap the bell housing. Okay, to remove the bell housing, we have to remove all these bolts around the transmission. All right, let's take a look at the transmission. So the shaft, the bell housing sits right here. It's held on by the front cover. And also after you remove the front cover, you have to remove this big giant snap ring, which goes right here in place of this bearing right here. So the snap ring goes right into this groove. You have to get something to pry it out and then pull it out. Okay, now since the B2000 transmission's already torn apart, now we got to do the exact same thing for the Miata transmission. Again, removing all the bolts right around the transmission right here, and removing the front cover, and then also the snap ring that goes in the front, and just lightly tap it out and it should come out just exactly like the B2000 transmission. Okay, we're going to slide the throwout bearing out, and the fork out as well. Now we're going to remove these bolts. They're 12 millimeter. Once you got all the bolt out, now it's time to remove the front cover. And some transmission have this shim in there. It just kind of sits right here to keep it in place. So sometime you'll see it coming out, and sometime it's just stuck inside this housing right here. So just remember to put it back if you see it sticking out. Okay, so now we have to get the snap ring out of the transmission, and it's very tricky to do it. I got a snap ring tool right here. So you want to put on the slit and then pry the snap ring out. While you're prying the snap ring out, get a little pry tool to get one other end of the snap ring and just pry that up. It's very tricky to do this. It's good to have a friend to help you out. There you go. That's the snap ring that holds the bearing in place. Okay, now to remove the transmission from the bell housing, we have to remove these bolts right here. There's a bunch of them, and once they come off, the whole transmission should separate. So I'm going to remove them now. They're 12 millimeter. You don't have to take the bolt out. I like to leave the bolt on there. Now I got a block of wood that I'm gonna hammer the bell housing to separate the transmission. Okay, now let's take a look at the two bell housing. The one on the left side is the B2200, the one on the right side is the Miata. They both looks pretty similar, but they are actually different in bolt pattern. Bolt pattern and width and size are slightly different, but everything else should line up. As you can see, the Miata transmission right here is pretty smooth compared to B2000. Has this little hump or this little air vent right here. In the back look pretty similar. And this side look pretty similar also. Another difference is the mounting hole. Slightly different right here. There's a couple more near the starter area. And right here is a couple less. So overall, they are pretty similar, and we're now ready to install the Miata bell housing into the B2000 transmission. Okay, now's a good time to clean everything. Once you clean everything and it's ready to be installed on the other half of the transmission, now's a good time to scrape all the old silicone off of here. And also we're going to apply new silicone on it. It looks pretty good right now. I'm not going to scrape anything. I'm just going to apply the new silicone. And the way I do it is I just kind of smudge it all over the place. If you prefer a better method, you can go ahead and do that. I'm just going to lightly put it in all the area, and then I'm just going to flatten it out with my finger. Like so. All right, that should be good. And keep in mind, you have to do this on all pieces of the transmission. So I'm just gonna lightly coat every section of the mating surface, and that should be good enough. These transmissions are machined to be flushly mated together. So it's not a big deal, but it's good to put a little bit of silicone just for extra security. You're going to want to apply silicone to the mating surface on the back side of the transmission too. You don't have to take it fully apart, but just to kind of have enough room to put your finger in there and put the silicone all over. Okay, now we're ready to mate the transmission together. All the silicone is applied on all the section of it. Now, the first thing I'm going to do is line up these bearings to where the bearing's seated on this side. Good thing to do is apply a little bit of oil right here so it slides easier, or grease. And then we're going to mate it in. Also want to tighten it into like a star pattern. So opposite section at a time. You want to tighten it in stages. So a little torque at a time. Okay guys, now we're ready to install a snap ring on here. If your gasket is damaged or if you want to replace it, now's a good time to replace that. And don't forget there's a shim that goes on that also, so we have to put that back on. Okay, now we're ready to install the snap ring. It's kind of tricky because this snap ring doesn't have a hole where you could put the snap ring plier on there to spread it. I'm just going to put the bottom. I think what I'm going to do is just install one side of the snap ring first on the slit edge of the snap ring, and then just kind of pry it into place. There you go. So that's the easiest way. Just kind of like insert one side of the slit first and then just go around and pry the other side in place. Okay, now we're ready to install this front cover. First thing I'm going to do is place these washer in place. A good thing to kind of keep it in place is just kind of dab a few oil. And that will keep it in place. Now we're ready to insert this. Make sure it's lined correctly before you tighten it. A good way to make sure that ring is in place when you're inserting it, go ahead and tilt the transmission up on the back side and then insert this. So you're going to have to pry, or you're going to have to put a block of wood on the back side. Now we can insert this into place. All right. So now is a good time to check to make sure everything works correctly. You want to make sure you can shift your gears, go through all the gears, first, second, third, fourth, fifth, reverse. Make sure the shaft right here can spin and you don't hit, and it doesn't come out of place or come loose or nothing like that. And also check to make sure your seal is good. Another way to secure the seal, to make sure there's no leak, you could run silicone to the outside and just run a couple dab across the section where it mates together. And that's about it for this video. So I hope you liked the video. So on the next video, we're going to mount the transmission to the engine and install all the clutch component. So I'll see you on the next one. Now let's take a look at our work.
ハイパースピードメディア